What exactly is acrylamide? Acrylamide is a chemical that is produced and formed during certain cooking procedures when certain types of food are used. It is a carcinogenic chemical, meaning that it causes cancer, and it contains an amide functional group as well as an alkene functional group. Now, it is a relatively unknown and unheard of chemical, despite it being a very well-known carcinogen, and it actually being surprisingly common and in surprisingly large amounts inside of cooked food, especially ones that contain sort of sugars and more complex carbohydrates such as starch, because the way that this product, acrylamide, is formed inside of cooking is when the certain specific amino acid, asparagine, inside of proteins inside of the foods that you eat reacts with different kinds of sugars. Now, this can be simple sugars, this could potentially be complex carbohydrates such as starch, more commonly starch. I don't think there are really many other carbohydrate and glucose-based sort of complex carbs and polymers that are able to sort of form this type of product. So starch and simple sugars are the only thing that I'm really aware of that can form this product. And so you're going to have things such as like white bread and brown bread. When you imagine you sort of have the bread form of bread when it's not been toasted at all, and then you put it in the toaster, and if you overcook it and it becomes out completely burnt, if it comes out like pitch black, and that specific piece of toast is actually going to have quite a high amount of acrylamide. Now, the way that a lot of chemical reactions work is that they are based off of heat, and heat is something that can allow and gives enough energy for certain chemical reactions to occur. And when sort of high heat and stuff, or high heat for a long period of time especially, it's going to mean that these chemicals, asparagine and sugars, are able to react a lot easier, and that is what causes the sort of blackening. And there are many more chemicals than acrylamide that are carcinogenic and are formed during these cooking procedures, but this is one that I've been made aware of recently during research, and I was surprised at how common it is, despite it being like a very potent carcinogen and well known in the scientific community, but not so much among civilians. Now, despite it being commonly formed inside of starchy foods, especially in things such as vegetables and potatoes, and more sort of processed and refined carbs such as bread and pasta and stuff like that, when you have sort of cooked vegetables, you'll notice the sort of blackening on the edges of them. That is things such as acrylamide forming, and it's the sort of same exact chemical process that occurs when you burn a piece of toast. And the same applies to the sort of chips and potatoes, and like the sort of potato chunks as well. All of that stuff, when it sort of starts to blacken and like discolor, that is acrylamide as well as free radicals still forming. I used to think that this whole blackening thing of overcooked food was due to oxidation and free radicals. And acrylamide, while not being a free radical, is one of these products that is formed that causes this sort of whole blackening issue. And now there have been a lot of methods to reduce the amount of acrylamide, and this is mostly common in sort of restaurants and stuff. Restaurants have to follow certain procedures to make sure that there is at least a low enough amount of acrylamide inside of the food that they cook, because otherwise that is a big health and safety issue for the customers. And so money has been invested and effort has been made into sort of trying to figure out ways to stop acrylamide being produced during cooking processes. And obviously it's not going to be something that's going to be able to be completely eradicated, but certain methods such as steaming and boiling are much better than frying, especially when it comes to vegetables. Now, when it comes to the sort of thing that you fry in, I much prefer to use saturated fat-based products such as lard or butter, because they're more stable. They don't contain any CC double bonds, which are more electron rich and therefore more reactive and more likely to oxidize. That's why I don't use polyunsaturated fats, even though they are said to be healthier, because like linoleic acid, alpha linoleic acid, they contain double bonds, but they are essential acids. And when it comes to cooking, polyunsaturated fats should never be used, because that is very likely to produce alone chemicals such as 4-HNE, which is an aldehyde and a carcinogen, and loads and loads and loads of other stuff that are just is random oxidized junk that is not going to be good for your body whatsoever. But back onto the point of acrylamide, steaming and boiling are ways that you are able to heat up and sort of be able to cook these vegetables, especially vegetables, to mean that they are cooked and taste nice, but without all the acrylamide and stuff. And while that's something that restaurants use, it's something that you at home maybe can use too, to help make sure that the stuff that you cook is healthier and safer for everyone that you cook for, I guess. The same thing applies to potatoes. Potatoes are probably one of the main foods that are susceptible to acrylamide, because crisps, chips, and potatoes themselves, when they're cooked, things like roast potatoes and stuff, the sort of more discoloured the potato, the more acrylamide it's going to have in it. So steaming and boiling potatoes, or at least partially boiling them before you then go on to frying them, can significantly reduce acrylamide levels. Now, one thing that this seriously taught me is that I remember having a dinner recently where it had some sort of potato like chunks, not like proper chips that had been like deep fat fried and stuff like that, but it was like proper potato chunks, like sauteed potatoes with some chicken and stuff, and that was my dinner and meal for the day. And there were a couple of the potatoes that were like really, really discoloured. Normally it was the smaller ones because they have like, there's just less of a potato for these sort of the heat and the reactions to occur and to cause this whole oxidation process and stuff like that. And some of these potatoes were like really discoloured and like just like pitch black completely. There was no sort of yellow potato whatsoever, and not actually really understanding that this stuff contained a lot of acrylamide, despite the fact that it had been fried in lard, which is a saturated fat, which, as I've previously mentioned, is my preferred frying method. I didn't realise that even despite the fact that it's going to be healthy, it's going to be healthier because it's not being fried in polyunsaturated fatty acids. It's the oil that's completely irrelevant. It's the heat that is actually the thing that's able to cause this reaction to occur. It's the extreme heat that actually means that this reaction is able to occur. A toaster and stuff, when you have the sort of burnt toast, that contains no sort of oils and stuff. So it's the oil that's completely irrelevant here. And we're just focusing on the asparagine and the sugars that are the reactants that actually cause this reaction to occur. So the oil is completely irrelevant here. But when you have this sort of like these sort of black chips and the stuff that doesn't particularly taste as nice as when it's just been lightly cooked, you know that contains more acrylamide, and it's not even something that you can particularly taste either. So it's just really something you have to look out for, especially with the whole discolouring, especially with potatoes and starchy foods. Things like crisps and chips and stuff, because they've been processed, they contain a lot of acrylamide. They're going to have been cooked using the cheapest oils, which are normally polyunsaturated fatty acids. So that only makes things worse, despite the fact that that's an irrelevant fact when it comes to acrylamide. But I just want you to sort of look out for this kind of thing, especially when you're cooking. Don't like overcook things when frying and stuff, because it contains a lot of acrylamide, and that is a known carcinogen. So that is increasing your likelihood of developing cancer, even though it won't develop it every time you like eat a high amount of acrylamide. It's just the likelihood is increasing. Your immune system is going to fight off and like a lot of the cancers that acrylamide is going to sort of produce. But the thing is when you sort of overwhelm it over a longer period of time, it's going to be unable to sort of take that intense load of carcinogenic chemicals that are so common in the food that you eat. But that's about it. I just really wanted to make you aware on something that I personally wasn't aware of until yesterday as of recording this video, and I think it's something that you should know about as well, especially when it comes to cooking your own food and stuff like that. But with that, have a nice day.